contract to
I will. I'll do that today. Okay, we'll get started. So we're doing that. I think we'll probably do the training when I'm not teaching at noon every Wednesday. And I think I'm going to move after Halloween or Fridays to noon instead of 11. But we'll always have lunch at both. If I'm teaching during the day at Champions on Wednesdays, then I'll do an evening training and it'll just be recorded and remote, but not in person. So we'll always have a Wednesday training no matter what. And then the Friday, we just always do it. I don't teach on Friday, so I'll commit to that always. And we'll always have lunch at both. And so a couple of things I wanted to do, and because I know that Mel's just joined in, and I know that Hammer's there, and I think he's gotten into houses before, but this is an electronic key box. It's on the doors most of the time. So, you know, we have agents that sometimes are going to show, and when you pull up the MLS listing underneath the picture of the house, there'll be a little icon directly underneath the clock. That's for showing time. All you do is click on it. You make the appointment. It'll tell you it's on a Supra. It'll tell you if there's a security, but always on the agent full report. If you don't see that little icon underneath the clock, scroll to the very bottom of the agent full report, and it always tells you how to make the appointment. And if it says text the listing agent, then you simply text Paul if he's with ABC Realty. Hey, Paul, this is Jen. I'm going to show your listing tomorrow at 123 Easy Street. Is it available? Number one, because you don't want to go show it if it's not. And if they reply back and go, yes, say, oh, I noticed it's not with CSS. What are the showing instructions? Question mark. That'll get you there. If it's on something like this, and I think maybe Mel has or hasn't opened one of these before, so it'll be hanging on the door, and there's a spring at the bottom, and you simply first open up your app on your phone, which is going to be the Super E-Key app, and it'll look. It's that top one. If you're looking at the screen, it's probably on the left, so you have it. So when you open it, okay, I always like to open it as I walk up to the door. And if your little update has an X on it, you just have to click on update and it'll update it automatically. So you push the bottom, and when you push the bottom, you can push as many times as you want. It's activating. Then you just hit obtain key. You plug in your 4-digit code, and you'll hear it go, did it, and then you push the bottom again, and the key comes out. Okay, so I mean, I'll have you practice it and stuff before we leave, but that's just a little pre-training because you'd be surprised how many people don't know. So it's not a big deal. It's just that, oh, well, when you walk up, you're like, what the hell do I do? So yeah, but always text the listing agent. Always in this market, ask if the property is available. And then if you don't see the little showing time underneath, always scroll to the bottom to see it. Maybe it says just call showing time. And then, but if it doesn't say anything about how to make an appointment, it usually will say text agent. And then you just text the agent, hey, this is Doug. I'd like to show your 123 Easy Street tomorrow. Is it still available? And then if they say yes, say, okay, what are the showing instructions? And they might say call CSS. That's fine. Don't reply back and go, I didn't see you put CSS in there and get in a fight with somebody. Just say, oh, okay, no problem. It was just an oversight on my end or whatever. Just make it easy. So, all right. So today, or actually this week, is on mortgages. And again, I'm not going to get too in-depth in mortgages, but I did want to kind of let everybody know that even Sabrina, she's making an offer on a house today that she wants to buy for herself. And she was asking me if she's going FHA and wanted to know, you know, what to mark on the appraisal waiver. And I said, you got to read the top of the appraisal waiver. It says not for FHA or VA. And we've had Brooks. He's actually going to be our speaker on Friday. And he's going to talk more in depth about mortgages, but this is like an overview for what we can tell a buyer when we're with them. So the top of that appraisal waiver says can't be used for FHA or VA. She wanted to know, Sabrina, if she could put in special provisions, buyer will pay the difference of $150 to the sales price. Sure, you could, because Brooks has said we could do that. However, what also Brooks said is no matter what, that says FHA requires that the buyer and the seller sign off on the fact that they're moving forward or not moving forward if the home doesn't appraise. And that's like a week before closing. It's an FHA amendment. So no matter what a buyer says on an FHA offer, the buyer will always have a right to not sign that form and not get funding if the home doesn't appraise. So the contrast that to conventional, we do have an addendum that they can waive the appraisal if it comes in less, and that does lock them in when they make the offer. And that's why right now, if you're working with an FHA buyer, it's more difficult to get a home accepted in a multiple offer situation if you're competed against conventional. Okay, so I once Googled, like, when did FHA start? And of course, as I teach, I have to know, so we had a Great Depression in 1929. Leading into the Great Depression, there were loans that were only 10 years and the down payments were 25 and 40, 50% down. But because it was 10 years, the payments were higher. And then going into the Great Depression, people let their homes go. And obviously it was much worse than the Great Recession in 2007. So coming out of 1929, the government had to find a way to make rural America urban, and they had to have a money supply. And also they had to make it easy for first-time home buyers. So FHA was created in 1934 to amortize loans for 30 years versus 10 going into the Great Depression. And then of course the down payment we know today is 3.5. It hasn't always been 3.5. It's been 3.25, so it's been less than 3.5, but that's what it is today. So FHA, VA, and USDA are 3 main government loans. For VA, obviously you want to ask the lender first before you make an offer on a condo, but a veteran can buy a VA on a condo if it's approved. I always like to ask, even on a condo, if it's FHA approved. Even if your buyer is not going to go FHA, if a complex is not FHA approved, generally speaking, the buyer has to put 20% down. So that might be easy for your buyer if they have 20%, but when they go to sell, that means they're only looking for buyers that have 20%. But if it was FHA approved complex, then the buyer could buy it for 3.5%, which makes it more marketable. So does that make sense? So for any condo, I always want to ask if it's FHA approved. And that means that if it is, even if the buyer goes, oh, but I'm not going to FHA, that's where our whole theme of our company is, yeah, we're talking about resale. So 5 to 6 years down the road, when you go to sell it, you can open it up for FHA buyers. If it's not FHA approved, you can't. And that's a huge resale issue on condos, in my opinion. So for FHA and VA, you're going to get, obviously, for FHA, I would always ask the lender why the buyer's going FHA, because that's not the best loan to compete in this marketplace. And generally a buyer that's going FHA has a debt issue or has either high debt or low credit score. So there's some minimum credit scores for FHA that are much different than the minimum credit scores for conventional. So obviously, if somebody does go FHA, that's the only way they can get into a house, then you move forward with it. But a good lender like Brooks, or maybe a personal lender that y'all know, will stay in touch with that buyer, trying to refinance them as quick as possible into a conventional product. Because we know on FHA, they pay that insurance forever. And in this market, I saw today that homes in DFW have appreciated about 28% just this year. So if a buyer puts 0 down conventionally, in less than the number of months in this year, they would have a 20% equity, and they could request their mortgage insurance be waived on conventional, but never on FHA, either until they die, pay it off, refinance, or sell it on FHA. So nothing wrong with FHA. You just want to make sure that that's the reason they're using that loan, is because they have to. VA is golden. I always ask a buyer when I meet them, just as part of my social, talk, is, hey, where are you from? My name's Alicia. Hey, where are you from? Oh, I'm from San Diego. Well, that's a military base. I'm from North Carolina. You should always say, oh, you military? And if they say yes, then you go, oh, DD 214, and that means that they have an honorable discharge. And if they say yes, say, oh, well, then you're in great shape, because I've got a lender that specializes in VA, and you give them you give them a lender. And the thing about VA is it's the only truly 0 down program, because the down payment 0, you can ask the seller to pay your closing costs as a veteran. Unfortunately, right now, VA has the same issue as FHA, is that if the home doesn't appraise, no matter what the veteran says, the veteran doesn't have to move forward. There's not an addendum that gives them the right to waive the value and pay the difference in down payment. They can say they're going to do it, and they can put it in the contract, but at the end of the day, VA and FHA have an amendment clause that the buyer has to sign, allowing them to move forward if the home doesn't appraise. And they have to okay it. So does that make sense? So, I mean, there's no way that you can guarantee a veteran or an FHA buyer will buy a house for $300 if it appraises for $290. Whereas on a conventional, you could do the waiver, or in paragraph 2 of the waiver, put $290, and that would obligate the buyer to still pay the $300 price range. Does that make sense? So, so what I always recommend in this market is most likely not asking the seller to pay any closing costs. It's just not going to happen. If we get where there's a little more supply of homes, then we might get to that market where you ask the seller to pay closing costs. And the best way that I've always found to ask for closing costs, number one, it's paragraph 12. So paragraph 12, there's a $sign, and you put whatever you want the seller to pay for the buyer there, but you get that amount from the lender, so you don't guess. Because the philosophy behind asking the seller to pay a buyer's closing costs is, let's say Paul had a house for $100,000. You're my buyer. You're FHA, VA, or conventional, and we're going to ask Paul to pay your closing costs. When he listed his home with Leslie, he said, I'm not going less than 100, period. Well, that means that if Jalicia is the buyer and she's paying her own closing costs, that he'll sell it to her for 100. But if we're asking for $5,000, he'll sell it to you for 105. Well, if I guess that 5,000 and 3 days before closing, the lender goes, hey, Doug, we can't use all that 5. We can only use 4. Didn't you just overpay for the house by 1,000? But if the lender told me that amount, I've just taken the liability off of me. So even though we have apps and stuff like that to be able to figure that, what I always do is with Brooks, every single time I've ever worked with him, I'm like, hey, what is the total closing cost that I can have the seller pay for Jen, the buyer? And he's like, $4,250. I put $4,250 in paragraph 12. Yeah. And if he doesn't, it's on him, not us.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you move forward. And if it's before closing and he can't use all that, then he's going to have to address it. And I've never had him wrong. And that's why it's always good to get it from a lender. So FHA, we know the down payment's 3.5%. And I mean, we learned that in school. So if the house was $100,000, the down payment would be $3,500. And that's what you put in paragraph 3A. 3B would be $96,500. And in our zip forms, it automatically calculates 3C. So now we go over to the actual contracts, and we know that we're going to have to fill out, the third-party financing. So generally speaking, third-party financing, you'll have almost every offer, unless it's cash, seller financing, or loan assumption. So it encompasses everything having to do with financing. So let's say that I met Jen. She was a buyer. We looked at a house like you're looking at tomorrow with your buyer. The buyer looks at you and says, I think I want to make an offer on this home. We know we log into zip forms. And before we log into zip forms, we know we have the agent full report and the tax roll. And I think all 4 of us know how to pull that up. So all you do is hit new. Once you hit new, you'll pick purchase. Once you pick purchase, you got to name it. So let's say that Jen was the buyer. Then you select residential always. And then there's a drop down, and you always select the buyer template. Once you select the buyer template, you scroll down, you hit save. The next screen, you're looking at a white summary square. Once you look at the white summary square, you go 2 tabs over to documents. And we're going to act like we already filled out the contract. So now we need to do the third-party financing addendum. So you'll see we have the IBS, the buyer rep, you got the 1 to 4. And then somewhere right after the 1 to 4, the way I template, I put your 2 most commonly used forms, which is the third party. So I've templated third party to be conventional. And so like today, I was talking to Sabrina when I was picking up those cupcakes, and she's going FHA. And I said, well, look, I've already templated paragraph 1. Before you delete it, go down here to FHA. Now, FHA basically has 2 types of loans. The most common is called 203B Boy. The one that's not too common is called 203K. The way I tell people to remember it is a 203K means you're going to Kmart to get some repair work, like mops and super cheap nails, because that's a home in need of repair. A 203K. It's where the lender is going to give you another loan to get some repairs done. So the most commonly used FHA loan is going to be 203B Boy. That means that that's what we're going to put here. And, you can do it just like that, or you can capitalize the B. Doesn't matter. Then this is always going to be the loan page. So on this page, the first page, you always put the loan amount. So if this was a $100,000 offer, FHA, 3,500 is down payment, we know the loan amount is 96.5. So we would put 96,500. Then you basically look at the top and go, huh, what goes here? Probably 30 years. What goes here? Well, 5% or 4. That's the interest rate for today. Now rate's about 3.5, 3.3. Always put about a 0.5% higher interest rate, because what that basically says is that this is a protection, that if we invaded North Korea tomorrow and rates went to 14, that your buyer would not have to pay more than 4. So you never put the exact rate, because rates do change a little every day. I usually put 0.5 higher. Okay, does that make sense? So I have 5% there, but when I do it, I change it and make it 4. And then 30 years again. And then this last one, just like you see there, 2% at the end there at the top. Okay, the last one says that the loan charges that the lender has are not to exceed a certain percentage of the loan amount. And I usually put 1 to 2%. So now you would go up and uncheck mark everything. And you would delete everything, because you don't want anything filled out anywhere else. Okay. So again, on FHA, you'd mark FHA, and then that would always be the loan amount. This is the loan amount page. Then you got to go to page 2, and in here you put the sales price, because this is the point of the contract that says for FHA or VA, you see it right there, FHA or VA, you've got to put the sales price in that blank. So you put 100,000, because that was the offer that ended up being the sales price. And basically what that means, if you read it, it says blah, 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 blah. And then it says VA or blah, 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 setting forth the appraised value of the property to be not less than 100,000. If the contract purchase price or cost exceeds the appraisal value, then this does not apply. But if it doesn't, so that means basically if it appraises for 100 or more, this does not apply. But if it appraises for less than 100, the next 3 A, B, and C apply. The buyer shall have the privilege or option of proceeding without regard to the amount of the appraisal. But they would have to pay the difference, or the seller, okay? Or if FHA financing is involved, the appraisal valuation is arrived at a determination. HUD does not warrant the value that the buyer should satisfy himself or herself the price in the kitchen or whatever. If VA is involved, the buyer elects to complete the purchase at an amount in cash. So that's saying the buyer can bring cash to still equal the 100. But at the end of the day, it says, or the seller may reduce the price. But at the end of the day, the veteran can terminate. The veteran can terminate if the home doesn't appraise for whatever's in that amount. Okay. And we cannot use the appraisal waiver on FHA or VA. Okay. Now let's say that you're going VA. Again, if you're doing VA and you open this up, the conventional is going to be pre-filled. FHA will be blank because we just filled it in. You would just mark VA, and you don't have to really do anything but put the loan amount. You'll put 30 years, 30 years. You'll put 4% and 1% at the end. So you'll almost always match whatever's already templated in the conventional, because again, when you open yours up, paragraph 1 will be pre-filled, because that's the most commonly used financing. Before you delete everything in paragraph 1, start filling in whatever is applicable. Really, the only other one will be USDA, and USDA follows very much in line with the VA right here, in that you don't have to put anything like 203B. That's only an FHA. So on USDA or VA, you're going to put the loan amount, 30 years, the interest rate, and a 1% at the end. Okay. On VA and FHA, you fill out the second page and you put the sales price. On USDA, you don't. Now, USDA, you want to ask the lender if it's approved for USDA. So that would be part of maybe your buyer getting pre-approved. They call whoever the lender is you recommend. I mean, I love Brooks. I mean, use whoever you want. He's really good. So I would call Brooks and go, hey, I text him usually. Hey, I'm working with a guy named Paul Kirkley. He's looking up in Salina. Is that USDA approved? Does he qualify? And Brooks comes back, goes, no, he makes $100,000 a year. He doesn't qualify. Hey, I'm working with this girl named Leslie. Does she qualify for USDA? Actually, she does. She's looking in Gunner and she makes $49,000. Well, basically what they do is they take they take the average of income in that county, and you have to make a certain percentage of that to qualify. So if you make too much money, you're out anyways on USDA. All right. And then everything else is pretty much done on this. Let's go through the appraisal waiver just while we're here. Again, you'll scroll down, and anything that you see that really doesn't say the whole sentence of the form, all you do is hover over it. And when it turns to the hand, it'll tell you the whole title. And this is it. So it's an appraisal waiver. And, you know, I mean, we have agents that ask me about this every time, every day. And I try to explain it as simple as I can. And I think we all know that what I've always used is I tell a buyer when they ask me in this market, and I'm selling. So when a buyer asks me, and they do all the time, like, well, what would you do? I'm like, well, I already have a house I live in, Paul. We've got to do what you feel comfortable with. So I would just tell you that I'm going to send you a CMA. You can look at it if you want, but it's not going to show any value currently of what this home is worth, because it could have been 6 months ago, 5 months ago. And at the end of the day, you just need to go as high as you feel comfortable, where if you lost the home over $1, you weren't going to go any higher. I just think that is super easy to explain. And the buyer's like, oh, okay. So I need to go as high as I feel comfortable, where if I lost over $1, I wouldn't go any higher. And, you know, don't be a smart ass and go, is there echo in here? But yeah, basically that's what I just said. And they go, oh, okay, well then you're good. Because if you don't get the home, which you probably won't, then they're not looking at you going, well, damn, I didn't know I was supposed to go as high as I was supposed to go. And you're like, yeah, well, I just said go as high as you feel comfortable, where if you lost the home over $1, you weren't going to go any higher. So that's easy. They decide that price. Then if it's above list price, or probably just period, you got to fill this form out. And probably you don't really have to fill it out if they really want the home, because all you're going to do is mark paragraph 1. You don't even fill out anything. And all paragraph 1 means is you look back at the buyer and you go, hey, here's what paragraph 1 means. We're offering $100,000, and the highest home that's sold in the last 6 months is 60 grand. So this home probably won't appraise for 100. But right now, the market value isn't based on the CMA anymore. It's based on a month of homes. So you need to go as high as you feel comfortable. We've already covered that. But now I need to tell you that if the home did appraise for $1, are you willing to pay $99,999 to still equal the 100 or not? And if he goes, I want the home no matter what, I will pay $99,000 if the home appraises for $1,000, because the sales price is 100. Then you mark paragraph 1. But like I'm working with somebody right now, they don't have unlimited cash to do that. They only have 20 grand. So if I was making an offer at 100, I'd mark paragraph 2 and put 80,000. And what that means is that if the home appraises for $79,999.99, they can back out. But if it appraises for 80,000, they have to bring 20 grand to closing to still equal the 100. Okay. So again, I think the $1 is easy on both to kind of explain. And I mean, I've had people, I've said it so much, I have agents tell me like, I did the $1 thing and they really got it. And then I've got agents that call and go, I didn't use the $1 thing. It got really confusing. And I'm like, just got to make it real basic. And I always like to say that paragraph 2 is like a floor. It's a floor that protects your buyer, that if the home appraises for less than the amount in paragraph 2, period, the buyer can walk. If it's what's in paragraph 2 up to the sales price, the buyer's paying the difference in an increased down payment to always equal what's in 3C. And 3C is the sales price. Okay. So you have a $500,000 offer. Well, let's take yours. You just said you made an offer the other day. Somebody did 290. It sold for 385. Okay. So let's just say hypothetically, I was that buyer and you told me like, hey, you need to go as high as you feel comfortable. And I'm like, I'll go 290. What was the list price? Oh, and they went at 290?
They went at 300.
Okay. So so I'm your buyer and you're like, hey, you're going conventional. So that's good. You talk to the lender and the lender says that I've got plenty of cash to mark paragraph 1, but you don't mark it until you ask me. And I go, hey, you know what? I don't have all that money that I want to use. I'll go in at 300, but what is listed at 290? I'll pay 290 if it doesn't appraise for 300, but I don't want to pay anything under 290. Well, you mark paragraph 2 and put 290. If I said, yeah, I don't care. I want it no matter what. And you're like, okay, well, so you're going in at 300. So if it appraised for $1, you bring $299,999 to closing. Yeah, I will. Okay. Unfortunately, what happened is somebody else did 386 and they probably marked paragraph 1, which means that If the home was listed at 290, you went in at 300, chances are at 386, there's no way in hell it's going to appraise. But a buyer somewhere said, I'll pay no matter what for 386. I'll get an appraisal, but I really don't care what it appraised for. I will, at the end of the day, pay 386. All you do is mark paragraph 1. That's going to be the strongest offer ever. Okay. So, so again, we're talking about loans. So we know that the most commonly used loan addendum or finance addendum is going to be third party. And I think we pretty much covered the conventional, the VA, and the FHA and the USDA. You're going to have a pre-approval letter. You're going to make sure that the property can go FHA. You're going to make sure that the seller will look at a VA offer. You want to make sure that it could go USDA possibly. So let's say that you come across somebody that's like Paul, who he was an oil and gas broker in Nevada. He made pretty good money. All the wells went dry in Las Vegas, so he moved here and got into pharmaceutical sales. He's starting over as an independent contractor as a pharmaceutical sales rep. So he has to have a 2-year track record to get a loan. But he's from a area in Nevada where he had a house with his 4 kids, and so he can't go to an apartment. So does he just have to wait for 2 years, or could you go into MLS and search for owner finance? That would be a seller that owes nothing on the house. Okay. So if you did, and I'll show you how to search that, but if you did find a home that the seller had no note on, then you would text the agent who represents the seller and go, hey, what are your seller's terms for financing the home on their own? And you basically would be here in your documents, and you go to the top corner and you click on all forms. And there's a big drop down that you always have to select all libraries. And then all you do is type in seller, and it'll pull up every single form with seller in it in the entire database of forms that we could use. And as you scroll down, you'll see down here that one says seller financing addendum. See it right there? As you hover over it, all you do is double click, and that just moved it over into the forms. So now you scroll down to the bottom and you open up the seller financing. And this is basically where the seller cannot owe anything on the house. So let's say that I own this house outright. You wanted to buy it. Let's say it was I was listed it for $500,000. She shows you, you're my agent. She texts you and says, hey, my buyer likes the house. We showed it specifically because it's owner finance. What does your seller want as your terms? So you text me and I go, I'll do 20% down. What are rates right now, Leslie? She says 3.5. I'll go, I'll do 3.5. I'm not a dick. So 3.5, I'll do 20% down. Let's amortize this thing for 30 years. So she's going to open up the seller financing addendum, and she's going to fill it out, and she'll have me help her to make sure that it's done correctly. But basically it's going to say that there's going to be a note for $400,000 because I want 20% down. Well, 20% of $500,000 is $100,000. So you'll write me a check for $100,000. I'll be the bank. I'll put that money in my savings account. It'll go to the title company. Everything's normal. At closing, there'll be a deed of trust, but it'll be basically where I'm the lender, and I get to take the home back if you don't make my payments. And let's say that the loan was about 1% of the payment was about 1% of loan amount. That means I'm making $4,000 a month for 30 years. If I die, I can will it to my kids. So it's a pretty good investment for a seller. And Dallas is really great for that, because if you do pay off your house, there's a lot of people with bad credit that make good money, and the only way they can buy a home is seller financing. So I also always ask the seller when I do that net sheet on a listing, I'm like, hey, I don't worry about your balance, because, a lot of times you don't even know what it is. And Paul goes, well, I don't have a balance. Well, your ears should perk up, because you need to advertise it as an owner finance. So that's where the form is. And just real quick, all forms can be found once you're in documents. Always go to your documents, and then all you do is you click in the right corner, all forms. There's a big drop down. You hit select libraries, select all, and then this is almost dummy proof. All you have to do is type in one word that's in the title of the form, and it'll pull up every form. And you don't even have to type in the whole word. So like owner, huh? You and I, you did. Right. So watch this. I'm just going to go own, and it pulls up every form. And what he wanted is, I told him to look for the agreement between broker and owner. That's what you use on a for sale by owner. So he just scrolled down, and he kept going. And right here, that if you hover over it, it says registration agreement between broker and owner. Every form that has own in it is listed right there in all the libraries, but you have to pick all from the drop down. And then the brokerage firm I was with, they would like say, look up form 274-1. I was like, why would you do that? And that's making it so difficult. Well, how about I teach you how to do it so you'll learn, and if I ever die, you won't have to go, what was that form? 27-42. You're like, oh, I just have to go in here and type in OW. OW would pull it up also. So lead, LEA, it would pull up everything. Lease, lead, I mean, everything with LEA, all right? And when I do y'all's templates, like I got it down to about 20 minutes per agent. I do all your templates in about 20. That's all I do is I go into templates and I go information about broker services, sellers disclosure. I just go sellers with an apostrophe. There's only one form with sellers as an apostrophe. It's sellers disclosure. I double click it. I mean, it can be, like that. So you can always find a form. All right. So now let's go in the MLS real quick and let's figure out, because there's some ways to look for just FHA. Or the financing, okay, and but it's not a set search criteria that you'll already have in your search. So there's two ways to do it. We know that when we log into MLS that this is our home screen. Is everybody good? Okay, so we hover over search. We're going to do a search for Jen for FHA properties. You hit quick, and you scroll down just a tad. Below results tab, you'll either see add or add remove. You click on it. And everything on the left is every search criteria in the MLS. On the right is only what you have. So if you said, hey, I need to select some financing, all you do is go FIN, and it pulls up everything with the word FIN in it. And you go, oh, propose financing. You select it, you hit add. Now you just moved it to the right. Now you hit the back button, and when you scroll down below the results tab, somewhere you'll see it, because they added it, okay? So you see it right here, proposed financing. So if I wanted to scroll down and go, I want to look just for FHA, boom. Now if I go back up and I go, hey, I want everything that's FHA 0-500,000 in Collin County, but I want just condos. There's one. That's how good of a resale that is. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, again, usually it's a little nicer property. Okay, so if you scroll down, you'll see right here under proposed financing that it says FHA. Okay, now when you see everything bold, see how you see these that aren't bold? Those are all the search criterias. So if you ever see something over here that's not bold, you can search for it underneath the results tab by hitting add. So if I wanted to look for alarm, I could see that it says alarm/security. Okay, so just bear with me. I'm just trying to show you so you'll have some knowledge here on this. So alarm/security, I go to add remove. And then on the left, I just type in alarm. Boom. That's cool. So all those criteria, everything that's not bold is a criteria that you could search. And all you have to do is go below the results tab, hit either add or add remove. Everything on the left will be that. You move it to the right by just clicking add, and then you can find it. Okay. All right. So let's go back to this for a second. So right now there's one FHA. Okay. What if I unmark FHA? Let's see how many there are in Collin County. There's 4. So, there's 3. There's not that many condos. Oh, you know what? I have master down. That's why. Watch this. From 4 to 18. So now let's mark FHA one more time. Went from 18 to 9. So out of 18, whether the master's on the second floor first, it went from 18 to 9 that are FHA. Okay. All right. So let's say that now, instead of looking for FHA, we want to look for owner finance. You keep scrolling down, and right there, when it says owner carries first, that's seller financing. Okay. So you select it. That means that's all you've selected is that by itself. Now you scroll up and you can see that so single family homes, there's one, 0 to $500,000. So 0 to $500,000 in all of Collin County, there's one home that's owned outright by the seller. Okay. So let's say that we went to look at it. Usually it'll tell you what terms they want when you click on the agent full report. So you scroll down and you can see right there that it says owner carries first. Okay. So it says very motivated seller. Look right here. Buyer financing fell through. Offering 2% commission. In here, it doesn't say anything about it being owner financed, but if I show this house to one of y'all that were, self-employed that could do it, I would go right here to Judy. I'd text her right there that number. Hey, Judy, this is Doug with DHS Realty. Hey, your property's owner finance. What are the terms your seller wants? She'll reply back, whatever, 10%, 20% down, 30-year mortgage. She wants the buyer to pay principal, interest, tax, and insurance, or with 20% down, Paul can pay his own taxes every year. Just shows the seller receipt that they've been paid. So anyways, I mean, that's kind of cool because now you can know that you can look through this whole thing. You could search by anything. And especially when you get up here, like somebody might go, hey, the backyard feature. Well, that's a term. Okay. Well, you're fine. HOA includes, okay. Interior features. I mean, anything. The only caveat is this. There might be a home that is owner financed, but the agent never asked the seller. So you don't know. This is only as good as the person that inputs it as a listing criteria. So if you listed this home and didn't say there was a pool and you search for pools, well, yeah, you want to know. Most of the time you do know that. But the one that's really hard is when people say, I need a study. Because in here, you can list a study as a study, a library, or an office. So if you search for an office, you don't get the study. If you search for a study, you don't get the office. If you, and so, sometimes you just got to, if somebody said, hey, I want a 4-bedroom with a study, what I would do is I would just send them 4-bedroom plus and say, hey, you know what? I'd love to search for a study, but I could do you an injustice by actually searching for that criteria. And if the listing agent didn't put it in, you're not going to get it. So you favorite the ones you like. I'll look through them and see if I see the study part in the section. Does that make sense?
I understand if I had a buyer that had bad credit and needed this, but does that mean that's the only thing this seller will look at?
No, okay. It just means, so like right here, yeah, so like right here, proposed financing, they said, hey, we'll do cash, conventional, FHA, and owner carries first, and VA. Okay. So that's a seller that's pretty motivated. Okay. And then in the section down here, he put very motivated. I don't know if I put that, but that's private remarks, so the seller doesn't see it. You usually don't want to say that. You might say it on a text. I wouldn't even use that word. I would just say, hey, we're looking at all offers, but again, it's been on the market 54 days. So it's in McKinney.
You did have a buyer that they did not want to or could not use the bank.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. Yeah. And owner carries first is a synonym to seller financing. It's just that they don't have seller financing as the term. And again, you go to proposed financing. Now, I think that I think that if you do a search residential detail, I think proposed financing is already included. Let's check. And then I'm pretty much done on the training. But see, if you go down here, I don't see it. So see, even on here, it doesn't. There's a little some extra stuff on a detailed search, but one thing there's not is so what you would do is if you did detailed search, you go add, remove. You type in finance, there it is, you select it, move it over, boom, now it's there. Now you hit back, and now it's going to be underneath the results tab. The one, and you'll see it right down here, see, proposed financing. Now, the one thing that you can always check is sometimes somebody will say, hey, I just want to look at builders. So on the detailed search, it says right there, owner type, seller type, you could select builders. Okay, or hey, I want a foreclosure. Okay, that's right there. Lender, REOs. Okay, so a foreclosure that sometimes a buyer wants is the foreclosure that hasn't been listed yet, and that's called a pre-foreclosure. Those are hard to find because that's a seller that's about to get foreclosed on. The ones that we have access to are after they've been foreclosed on. They're bid back by the bank, and then the bank calls Leslie and says, hey, would you list my bank-owned property? And it's called an REO, real estate owned by a bank. And you'll mark it as that in the MLS because you want people searching possibly for those specifically. What I do is I tell a buyer when they call me and ask me something like that in this market, I go, you know what? There's not many foreclosures. So let's take out that and just let me send you everything. Let me just send you builders, individuals, banks, everything. Because searching for just deals, there's not any in this market. If we get to like 9 months of listings, that means we have some foreclosures. And then you could be searching for just REOs for people. But if anybody asked you that today, I would just say, I'd love to, but there's not going to be that many. How about I just send you everything and we'll go do them individually. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions y'all have on the, again, so just to recap, and then we'll be done in about 3 minutes and the training will be perfect, 45 minutes. But we have basically third-party financing. You'll use that the most. So that's going to be for conventional FHA, VA, and USDA. Anybody that makes a cash offer, you need a proof of funds letter. And usually you just say, hey, just need a proof of funds letter. You can white out the account number if you want. You know, some people have, security issues there, but you need a proof of funds letter. And then if they own the house outright, seller financing is an option. And the other big thing that we see a lot of is, a seller has a seller house before they can buy the next one. And, we have an agent in our office right now that unfortunately is working with a relative, and the relative's in Colorado, has a house they need to sell. They're using the cash from it to buy here. So it's a sale of other property addendum, but didn't want our agent to use that addendum. So they have no cash other than the cash getting out of their house. And I was like, well, when you make the offer, they're going to ask for a proof of funds letter. And he's like, I know, but I can't. I told my relative that, but he still wants me to make these offers. And I was like, well, you'll look like an idiot, because every seller agent is going to say, hey, it's a cash offer. Where's the proof of funds? And then he's having to present a sale of other property that they're being rejected on because of the market. And finally they got one. I mean, he made 12, 20 offers, and I helped him with every one of them. And I kept saying, like, you're going to get the same answer. Well, finally they found a seller that was okay with it. So they made the offer with it like it was cash. The agent replied back, just like I said. Our agent says, well, they have a house to sell. He's like, okay, well, we're okay with that, but we need you to attach the addendum for sale of the property, which is what I told him he always needed to do. But his client told him not to. And they just kept getting rejected offers. So finally we found one that did it. So, anything like that, just run by me and I'll give you a way to get, but yeah. So, but other than that, I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll put this on GroupMe and put it on